Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
And cheers to another week at Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing. Welcome into this Monday edition. Glad to have everybody here with us today as we make our way through, now officially, through the summer months. Major League Baseball, you're up, all yours. Baseball gets the stage. We'll kind of catch up on what's been happening now that we shift our attention. We're through the NBA draft, all of those things. We're through NFL minicamp, sort of waiting for training camp here. It is an interesting time of the sports here. A little golf happening. It's time to catch up, catch your breath a little bit. Welcome in, everybody. Glad to be here. IHOP hotline is open as always. 869-1240 is that number to call. Glad to be here with you, Tommy. How are you? How's the weekend?
It was a good weekend, busy weekend, had a lot going on. Had a chance to listen to you for a while on CBS Sports Radio on Saturday. We were out running around, doing a bunch of stuff, going to the park and the store and all these different errands, and had a chance to have you on in the car.
It's an interesting time to go 5 hours solo as we talk about this time on the sports calendar, because it is sort of that lull a little bit. But, if you're a baseball fan, if your baseball team is good, it's a great time of the sports year. Unfortunately for the Royals, it is yet another. But, we're entering that time now with Kansas City, where things do sort of come back into interest here for the next month or so as we make our way through the All-Star break, the trade deadline, and all of those things, because what happens there will alter one way or another. It's been the negative way lately, but as you come up to the trade deadline, things that happen right now could have a big impact on the season. So we'll sort of begin to digest the Royals a little bit here over the next couple of weeks. What's tradable? What do you not want to see traded? Is there anything? And what could potentially come back? We'll look into all that. We'll look around baseball, too. We haven't really done that now as we get close to the halfway point of the Major League Baseball season. Very close. We'll begin to look pretenders, contenders. What do we think? What do we like? And some other things as well. It is football season always, though, Tommy. And I think two things that have been interesting to me. Well, one is the Chris Jones contract, which still is not done. He did not report to camp. If they choose to fine him, it'd be about $100,000. I don't think that they will. But, it's still not done. And it is sort of a chicken and egg thing. Not, I don't think, with the Chiefs as much as the other players on the market. Not all these defensive tackle deals that, if you follow this closely, they haven't all been done. That sort of sets the market for Chris Jones. I don't think he's going to demand more than Aaron Donald. I do think he's going to demand more than everybody else, and everybody else hasn't signed their deal. Yet he doesn't have a deal. But to me, Tommy, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, that's not the Chiefs' problem. Like, it's not their fault that the Jets haven't finished their deal with Quinnen Williams, right? It's not. So at what point does this is an interesting dynamic, because if that's what Jones wants, which I totally get, right? But at some point you have to be a little bit predictive, don't you? And it's like this leverage thing, but is that worth holding out a camp for? Like, because that's not the Chiefs. It's not like the Chiefs are doing anything wrong, if that's the scenario, which it kind of feels like it is.
Well, here's the other reason I think why Chris Jones feels like he has some leverage in this. The Chiefs have almost zero cap space to work with. Like, they have the lowest amount of cap space in the entire league. And so if they can convert Chris Jones's salary to a signing bonus, that's going to free up a ton of money for them to be able to go and do the things that they want to do. Chris Jones and his agent, they know that. They know that the leverage is there, and they don't have to play ball. And the Chiefs are then looking at no cap space to be able to do anything else. So they'll look at Chris Jones as the having the opportunity to be able to convert that signing bonus, go out and get some other deals done, be able to, get the team ready to go for this season. And so I would imagine that the Chiefs feel some urgency in that regard. But Chris Jones is also sitting back saying, well, that's fine. I get that. I want to help you out. I want to help you be able to, convert and get some more cap space, but I'm also going to need to get paid. And so that's really where the rub is. So it's kind of that, they're doing that dance right now. It's that give and take, that negotiation. I know that Chris Jones probably feels like he's got the upper hand right now. I don't really know what kind of leverage Kansas City really would have to stand on in these negotiations.
I don't think that it's leverage as much as what are they supposed to do? Like if Jones wants to just do the bigger deal, what is Kansas City can't do anything right now. What can they do?
Well, I get it, but I think that part of it is coming to the table and saying, look, like we've got to, I guess, find a way to get a deal done. If we, number one, if we want to get you back, which I would imagine the Chiefs do, but number two, if they want to be able to open up a bunch of cap room, to be able to get the other things done that they want to get done. So at that point, come to the table and say, look, I understand that, you want to get paid. We recognize that too. Let's try to find a way to get this done where it's, I guess, team friendly, but also player friendly. We can convert the salary
just about anything
to signing bonus, right?
Just about anything is team friendly, I think, right now, because they can't afford to put him on like a franchise tag. They can't do that. So, a contract is better in that sense. And yeah, they can structure it in a way that it does help them now. So it's not like that, the total dollars is obviously a negotiation and all those things. That's fine. But I just, it's really tough. Because if the goal is to make him the highest paid guy, because I think he's already the fourth highest paid defensive player in football. So if the goal is to make you number 2, right, then you don't know what number 2 is going to be until something totally out of your control happens. And if that's the case, like what leverage are you trying to play on the Chiefs? And like, what's the point of not showing up to a ring ceremony and not showing up to minicamp? Because there's not much I wouldn't think that the Chiefs can do right now anyway, is they wait for somebody else to do their business.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing too, to keep in mind is that, remember earlier this offseason, Chris Jones replied to a tweet where he said that he was a Chief for life and that he would not play for another franchise. Keep in mind, that's on social media, right? But I certainly think that the Chiefs can use that in negotiations, right? Like maybe trying to get him to leave some money on the table. Hey guys, look, I want to be in Kansas City for the remainder of my career. Okay, cool. Well, why don't you take a little bit of a discount then to make that happen? So they'll use, but you better believe they'll use that in negotiations, right? To reaffirm that loyalty to the franchise, because then at that point, Chris Jones looks like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. He wants to be a Chief for the rest of his life, but then he also wants all the money in the world. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to balance that.
I think he's trying to let fans know, like, hey guys, this is going to be fine. And I appreciate that. And I believe that, quite frankly. It's the not showing up now. And maybe it's just so standard business operating procedure and all that stuff. Maybe it's just like you just can't show up because I do think there is an amicable feel to this. It doesn't feel tense other than the fact that he hasn't showed up, but there hasn't been a whole lot to show up to. And training camp's the real, we all look at training camp. If it doesn't show up to training camp, now you're hurting your team. I don't think Chris Jones not showing up to minicamp does a whole lot to affect the team, right? Other than provide some sort of distraction. But this team's equipped to not let that be a distraction. It's not that big a deal. But if we get into training camp and let's say you're still waiting on Quinnen Williams and the Jets, and you're into training camp now, you're going to hold out a training camp because that does affect your team. And I just don't know what can happen if you're waiting on somebody else to do their business. So it's still out there. Nothing has been done, but nothing's been done in the other places to sort of set this domino effect that, again, the reporting for a long time has been that that's the goal, right? Get these other deals done, let Chris Jones top them, doesn't have to top Donald, and it'll be, and we move on. Well, those other deals aren't done, and maybe they're doing. Maybe Quinnen Williams is thinking the same thing. Like, I want Chris Jones to sign his deal, and I can beat that deal.
Well, and it also sounds like, according to Adam Schefter, that the holdup in the Quinnen Williams deal isn't about money at all. It's about the length of time that the contract is in existence. Like, it looks like Quinnen Williams wants 4 years. The Jets want a 5th year. They want to be able to have control over Williams for an additional year. I think knowing that it's not about money at this point, according to Adam Schefter, that it's more about the length of the contract, means that it's going to get done sooner rather than later. The thing about it, though, is that report from Adam Schefter came 2 weeks ago. And since then, it's been radio silence on an extension with Quinnen Williams. So I don't know at this point, if you're really only haggling over the length of the contract, but the money isn't an issue, you would think that it'll get done in short order, but that hasn't happened yet. And again, if Chris Jones is then looking at someone like Quinnen Williams, or, and he's not the only one. There are some other players at the defensive tackle position that are young, that are looking at new contracts right now. It could be a domino effect, and that could be another reason why we're waiting so long to figure out what's going to happen with Chris Jones.
Well, Dexter Lawrence got his deal done, and I think Simmons of the Titans was the other one. I think his deal's done, but it's interesting. Let's go to the phone lines. Mike joining in, wants to talk a little Chiefs Bengals, perhaps. Mike, what's on your mind? Welcome into Sports Daily.
Hey guys, hey, it's cool to be on the air. Recently, Bengals player Jamar Chase was asked a question about Patrick Mahomes. He responded by saying, "Pat who?" In my opinion, that was not an intelligent thing for Chase to say. Mahomes is a 2-time NFL MVP and a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. And Chase's team, the Bengals, have never won a Super Bowl before. Not a smart thing for him to say. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike. Friday, we spent some time with this, and I spent some time with it nationally over the weekend. I love it. I think there's a chance that this could become an all-time great rivalry. I think there's a chance this could reach Brady Manning in those early years. Well, not early, but sort of middle years, right? When they would play every year, and they were always meaningful games, and they were the two guys just battling it out for MVP. I think we have a chance to get there. Friday, Mike, we spent a ton of time on this because it's almost it's getting to the point now where these two are sort of married together. And this is what happened with Brady and Manning too. Like, it was hard to have a conversation about how great either of those guys were early in their career without bringing the other one up, right? And you sort of had to pick a side. Now, I don't think anybody's picking a side like to go Burrow over Mahomes because he hasn't done it long enough, but his trajectory to this point is very similar to where Mahomes was after 2 full seasons. He just didn't win the Super Bowl. He lost it by 3 instead of edging it out like the Chiefs did. Other than that, like you've got basically mirror images of early in the career as far as, numbers and success. Burrow doesn't have an MVP, but that's partly due to Mahomes, I think. But it is an interesting one, and I love it, Mike. I think it's fantastic. Was it the smartest thing to do? I don't know. I think we probably will overplay it just a little bit. I don't think that's the reason one of those teams will beat the other on New Year's Eve or in the playoffs, but I think it adds to it, and I'm quite frankly, I'm here for all of it. I want the trash talk between these two teams to keep it going.
I think it's fun. It's one of those things that, it makes that budding rivalry seem bigger, and it's not going away anytime soon. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, and we talked about it on Friday. It wasn't that long ago that the Bengals were terrible. I mean, they had won only a couple of games. They brought in Zach Taylor. The first year under Zach Taylor was really bad as they were starting that rebuild. You would have never, ever, ever thought that the Chiefs and the Bengals would have this rivalry just a couple of years later. And here we go. All the Burrowhead stuff and everything that, the Bengals going to the Super Bowl and then the AFC Championship game inside Arrowhead and an instant classic there. It makes it fun. And now you've got, players that are continuing to talk, and Orlando Brown is now over with the Bengals. So that's going to add fuel to the fire. There's just a lot to it that, I said it on Friday that I almost get more excited about that rivalry now than I do about, the Broncos and the Raiders.
Oh,
and I feel like the Chiefs have moved away from those division rivals and have separated themselves so largely from those other teams in the division. Now it's about the Bengals really. And I guess the Bills too, to an extent, but really it's the Chiefs and Bengals.
Yeah, the Bills are in that mix. They just haven't been able to take that final step. I don't personally think Josh Allen is in that mix as much. I think one name to watch in all this, and I brought this up nationally. There were some Chargers fans trying to get upset that Herbert wasn't being mentioned there. And I'm not sure that there is a bigger fan of Herbert's game than I am. But the reality is, and he's been at it, same as Burrow, basically, but he's had essentially 3 full seasons. His numbers are fine, but the winning hasn't been there. And you could argue early on that he's been put in a better situation with a better roster than Joe Burrow had early. So Herbert can get there, I think. I don't think that. And here's what else is really difficult about it, because Josh Allen and the Bills do give you a third to the Chiefs and the Bengals, but until they can get over the hump, it's not going to be there, right? Because they've arguably had the best chance. They've had the least turnover through these last handful of years, and they haven't been able to get it done. And the conversation a couple of years ago was, it almost became, is Mahomes as good as Josh Allen? And then Mahomes and Mahomes and Burrow sort of, to me, took over that. And Mahomes never left it. Mahomes was always the best. I thought that was silly. But I think Burrow has passed Allen and will stay ahead of him. I think Justin Herbert's got a chance to be in that mix. His numbers through his first 2 years are as good as we've ever seen in this league. I mean, and now he's through 3 years, but he's incredible. If they can get things figured out there, maybe we do get another one, and then maybe the division rival does come back into play. But right now it's those two, and I don't see any reason why those two aren't going to be there for a long time. And the more they talk trash, the better it's going to be. The one thing about those two guys that they've both done without fail in the NFL essentially is win, right? And that's what makes this good. And when you watch them play, it's what makes it harder to believe that there'll be major failure in either of their careers. Like, I think they're going to be the kind of quarterbacks that we've seen, Brady, Rodgers, Manning, right? Where they're never bad. Like, their teams are never bad. It's the gold mine in the NFL.
Right.
If you've got that great quarterback and you're never bad, that's it. Like, that's the ticket, right? And I think both of those guys will be there. I think the Bills might be. We'll see. It's a big year for the Bills. It's a big season for Josh Allen and the Bills.
The other thing about the Bills, too, is that their division is getting tougher with Aaron Rodgers joining the Jets. And then, of course, we know about the Dolphins and all of that. It is, but I still think that the AFC North is the Bengals to lose, or I'm not so sure that's really the case in the AFC East with the Bills. I mean, and we can go through all the different teams. I mean, outside of the Ravens, I'm not super confident in the Steelers challenging the Bengals, and I'm certainly not confident in the Browns challenging the Bengals. So I think that
I don't think they'll challenge them, but I do think both those teams will be better. I think every team in that division will improve and close the gap to some degree with Cincinnati. I think all three of them got better.
But don't you think that gap is already closed, though, in the AFC East with the Bills? I mean, when you've got the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, and then you've got the Dolphins, and, I think the Patriots are probably falling behind a little bit there in that division. But I certainly, if you were going to ask me right now today to pick, who's more likely to win their division, the Bengals or the Bills, it's absolutely the Bengals.
I don't know how I'd answer that, actually. I'm not sure, because I do think the Ravens will close the gap. I don't know about Cleveland. I think the Deshaun Watson thing is going to be a total and utter failure, but I think there's still definitely a chance that it's not. I don't know. I think top to bottom, the North is better than the East, but that's just because of the Patriots. I think the Steelers are better than the Patriots is basically what it comes down to. It'll be interesting, but the reality is both of those divisions, I think, are better than the AFC West this year. The Chargers have a chance to be the best of all of those teams, right? Like, there's absolutely a world where the Chargers could be better than, let's say, it's the Jets or the Ravens. I don't think that's out of line at all. But the Raiders and the Broncos aren't going to be very good. So the East, and that gives you two not so good teams. But right now it is the Chiefs and the Bengals. And for a long time, it was the Colts and the Patriots. And yes, there will be outliers. There will probably be a year where the Bills get through the AFC and Josh Allen, I would guess. And it could be this year. The Bills should be, if Stephon Diggs is okay and that, that off the field stuff is all right, then they should have a better chance to get there maybe than they ever have. If they can get healthy, they get Von Miller, he doesn't get hurt. Like, don't count out the Bills. And the AFC is a monster. Full circle here. That's why the Chris Jones thing is beginning to get a little uncomfortable. Like, the Chiefs got to have him. And I can't figure out now why, if you're waiting on others to do their business, why this is on the Chiefs and maybe it's not. And I guess that's the question. We can take a break. Like, is this on the Chiefs? Do we even think this is on? Like, is Chris Jones even putting this on the Chiefs, or is it really just like everybody's waiting and this is how you have to wait? I don't know. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll come back. Remember that Mahomes contract that we were told was going to get done? Boy, that doesn't seem likely. We'll talk about that as well as we make our way through a Monday edition. Glad to be here with you, everybody. It's Albracht and Castor. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. Albracht and Castor, glad to be here with you. We'll just continue the conversation here that we kind of got started. The cool thing about the next, 2, maybe 3 weeks or so is that IHOP hotline is going to be open, and we are sort of open for business here as we make our way through an interesting part of the sports calendar, a way to, sort of officially, I think, end the last year and move forward into the next year. And we've done that now with the NBA as we get into the offseason and wait for Fred VanVleet sort of to make his deal. But we're talking Chiefs right now, and the Chris Jones deal sort of just has us taking stock of everything. And I don't know what makes this get done outside of Quinnen Williams. To me, it feels like that's what this is all waiting on. And the Chiefs will just top whatever that deal is, which is the way it should happen. Chris Jones is better than Quinnen Williams, as much as I like Quinnen Williams. I don't, we haven't seen or gotten any indication that there is a length of time concern or issue. I would imagine the Chiefs are going to give him a 3-year deal. I think that would be comfortable on both sides, quite frankly. Maybe Jones wants more. You brought up that Quinnen Williams wants less and the Jets want more years. I would imagine it's the opposite with the Chiefs and Jones. They'd probably like a shorter deal. And he's obviously going to try to get as many years as he can, but just make it guaranteed money, get it loaded to the appropriate year. I think the other complicated thing is, Tommy, there's probably some desire to work both this and the Mahomes deal at the same time to try and massage out cap hits in each season and where they come. Mahomes's deal, if I were Brett Veach, and I'm not near smart enough and I don't totally understand all this, it gets so complicated. I would want, in the years where Jones is going to make a ton, Mahomes to make less and vice versa, right? At least for the next 2 or 3 years, and try to figure out a way to do that in a way where they both don't totally dominate the cap in a year. I don't know if that's even possible, but I think it is. And I think you've got in Mahomes somebody who's totally willing to make whatever happen that needs to happen. It's interesting to me that we've got holdouts now, because I never really saw contention. And I still don't know if I see contention. But man, Jones didn't show up to the ring ceremony. And I know he said he was sick on social media, but I don't know that I buy that, especially when you don't come to minicamp. It's just strange. It's a little bit strange. There's a strange turn happening in this whole thing that I don't know. It's just kind of sticking in me a little bit.
I think you and I have different opinions on this, because I think that you put a lot of it on Chris Jones, or you put a lot of it on Chris Jones, right? Like and I don't. Like, I put this on the Chiefs, like needing to get a deal done, and like the leverage.
But how can they
really?
If Jones wants to wait for Williams to top his deal, what can the Chiefs even do at this point?
Then why not just go ahead and not even worry about the Quinnen Williams deal? Pay him above that to get the deal done. Like, you're trying to expedite it, right?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think Chris Jones wants to do that. I think he wants to top Quinnen Williams.
I get it, but like, if you have and the Chiefs should have a general idea of the kind of money that Quinnen Williams is going to garner, right? Like, they might not know specifics, but they kind of have a general idea. They should, right, on how much per year Quinnen Williams will get. Then just go over that. And go enough over that to where at that point, Chris Jones is like, all right, I don't need to wait for Quinnen Williams anymore. Right? Like,
I agree.
Just get it done.
I think that they would. I just don't know that these guys are alphas, Tommy. Chris Jones wants to make sure he's making $1 more than, if it's everybody but Donald. I mean, good for him for understanding what Donald is. But like, we've seen this. Tyreek Hill left because he wanted to make more than what Devontae Adams just got paid. Each quarterback, seriously, it's like $1 more. It's crazy. It's what happens all the time. And so I don't know if it is. Look, if what you're saying is true and the possibility exists for the Chiefs to get this done without waiting for Quinnen Williams, then yeah, I agree. They should get it done. What I'm saying is I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure that there is anything outside of making him higher paid than Aaron Donald, which they shouldn't do. But I'm not sure there is anything they can get done at this point. If Jones's goal is to be the guy and you don't know what that's going to take, I don't know what you're supposed to do.
I think what you're supposed to do at that point is to show your cornerstone franchise defensive player how valued he is by saying, you know what? You know that Quinnen Williams deal? You know that you're waiting on that? Why don't we go ahead and blow that out of the water? Let's go back to the table. We don't even know that deal's not even done with Quinnen Williams, but let's go ahead and find a number that is so far above the Quinnen Williams deal that you feel comfortable and we can go ahead and get it done. Because honestly, the urgency should be on the side of the Chiefs. And typically I wouldn't be a proponent of overpaying for someone, even if it is Chris Jones. Normally, I wouldn't be a proponent of, saying, you know what, let's give up the negotiations and just pay you whatever you want and get it done. But the urgency, because of the lack of cap space, is there for the Chiefs enough to where they should be saying, Chris Jones, like, write a number on a piece of paper and we'll pay it, because we need to convert that salary to a signing bonus so we can go out and get everything else done. Because right now, by not getting a deal done, it's hamstringing the Chiefs for doing, the other things that they need to accomplish. So at this point, like, that's what I would advocate for. And maybe there isn't a number for Chris Jones where he would feel comfortable with just saying, all right, like, let's go ahead and just get it done. Maybe regardless of the number, he wants to wait for Quinnen Williams. I don't know. But I feel like if that number is big enough, I think at that point, Jones can just say, forget about Quinnen Williams. Let's go ahead and get our deal done.
Chris Jones might be my favorite defensive player in football right now. He's up there, certainly. Okay, let me preface what I'm about to say with that. And it is June 26th, and we're pondering here. So nobody please overreact or take this in some crazy direction. But here's the other harsh reality. If Chris Jones doesn't play for the Chiefs, they have a chance to win a Super Bowl, Tommy?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question.
Of course they do. Yes, they do. They do. Chris Jones is third most important, maybe the second most important player on the team. I'd probably say it's 2A and 2B with he and Kelsey. But yes, the Chiefs are always going to have a chance to win a Super Bowl when it's Mahomes under center. I think that we know that from Mahomes now. Now, does it get way harder? Absolutely. Again, I think he's probably the second most impactful defensive player in football. He's my favorite defensive player, but he doesn't play quarterback. And so we saw with Tyreek Hill, how many people, Tommy, and let's be honest here, we'll remember back to predictions, when you said Tyreek Hill will not be a Chief, can they still win a Super Bowl? There were a whole lot of people writing the Chiefs off, more than there has been in a long time, right? And what happened? They were just fine. If we think that there's leverage for Chris Jones here, but I wonder how much the leverage that, and the Chiefs, honestly, publicly, probably want there to be that perception, right? But the reality is, nobody is that important outside of the quarterback in the NFL. Nobody is ever. And that's the economics of football right now. And so, I just don't want this to get to that point of contention, because I think that's the reality. Like, at some point, yeah, Chris Jones could price himself out where the Chiefs are like, you know what? We got to move on. That's what they did with Tyreek Hill. Now, Jones is far more impactful to their chances, I think, and I think we saw that. As great as Tyreek Hill is, Jones is, a linchpin on defense that they got to have. But other guys can play there, and maybe they adjust, and maybe they take a step forward offensively, and maybe it's 1 year while they retool and find whatever it is. I don't think the Chiefs are in a position ever in contract negotiations of desperation. Like, they outside of Patrick Mahomes, there will never be an ounce of real desperation in the Chiefs front office. They've won their Super Bowls. They know at some point they have to continue to slowly retool, and there will be a new phase of the Chiefs at some point. We're sort of in that middle ground now, but that's the reality. The perception is Chris Jones has all this leverage. I'm not sure that he does have all this leverage.
Okay, so what if I told you that the Chiefs can't get a Patrick Mahomes contract extension done until they get a Chris Jones contract extension done? And you mentioned that there's not desperation from the Chiefs front office, but if one is holding up the other, and if one is holding up the most important one, then at that point, I don't want to say it's desperation, but at that point, the timing becomes really important. They don't have the cap room. They don't have the cap room right now to be able to do anything with Patrick Mahomes.
I don't think there's urgency for Mahomes. I think Mahomes has dispelled that as clearly as he can. I don't think that there's any urgency for Mahomes. There is urgency for Chris Jones. Chris Jones, he's at the point of his career where this is probably the last mega deal he's got. Now, he may do more deals down the road, but this is the biggest one he'll probably do. And so this is a critical moment. Mahomes' deal isn't going to be held up by Jones in the sense that they can't get them both done. The only thing about Mahomes, I think, that gets held up is they have to figure out where to put the money. But Mahomes doesn't have anything to worry about, and I don't think he is worried about it at this moment. I do think that it makes some fiscal sense to try to do them in tandem, but that has more to do with fitting Chris Jones in than it has anything to do with Mahomes. It just sort of has to happen that way. I don't know. There could be, and this is, again, June 26th conversation here, grain of salt kind of conversations. There could be absolutely no big deal happening. Honestly, everybody's sitting back and saying, Brett Veach calls Chris Jones and says, hey, man, you doing okay? I know you're sitting out. Still waiting on that Quinnen Williams deal. You good with that? And he says, yeah, sorry, I got to sit out because that's the way business is done in the league. No big deal. We'll get it figured out. If it's not going to get done before training, I think that absolutely could be on the table, right? And maybe even the most likely. And I guess the hardest thing for me to get a grasp of is, what does a holdout even mean? What does a holdout of minicamp and not showing up to that's the part that I can't quite get a sense of, is how big a deal is that? Because I don't know. It could be anywhere from no big deal to very big deal. And I don't know. I really don't know. And that's what, like, if it's training camp, I know, okay, that's a big deal. Like, training camp is a big deal. Mini camp and ring ceremony, where does that fall in the scale of big deal? I really don't know. And that's what I think I'm having the most trouble with.
So I think that the only concern that I really have with this is that there's been a fairly long-standing strategy that Brett Veach has implemented over the last couple of seasons. And really, I would even suggest that it goes back even further than, when they let Tyreek Hill go to the Dolphins and they traded him. That strategy, in my mind, has always been, you take care of Mahomes, Jones, and Kelsey. And outside of the big three,
I agree.
Then you go and you draft well. And then you go and you try to plug holes with inexpensive veterans. That's kind of been the strategy for a while. Now, going back to the question that you posed a few minutes ago, can the Chiefs win a Super Bowl without Chris Jones? Sure, it's possible when you've got Patrick Mahomes under center. My issue with that, and my concern with that, is that goes away from the strategy that Brett Veach has implemented for so long that's led to this success and the Super Bowl victories and the rings and all of that. So I'm not saying it can't be done without Chris Jones, but what I'm saying is that it goes away from the best practices it's built the Chiefs over the last 4 or 5 seasons. I'd hate to move away from that. And I think that Brett Veach would hate to move away from that too. That's my only concern. Can they? Sure. It makes it that much more difficult if they don't have Chris
strategy,
Jones
Tommy, was never to trade Tyreek Hill either. Sometimes you have to adjust. Like, sometimes you have to adapt. And that's on Chris Jones, not the Chiefs. I don't think there's any doubt the Chiefs are ready to make him, whatever it is, above everybody else but under Donald. I think that's what Chris Jones wants. I think it's just become this waiting game. And does that make it problematic, or is that just out of everybody's control and we just sort of have to wait? I don't know. I think it's probably the latter, probably. But is there a possibility it's the former? And that's what has me just slightly concerned. If I think there's a 95% chance, 95 is starting at defensive tackle week 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs and everything's fine. There's 5% chance that it's not. The longer this goes, maybe the more that creeps up just a little bit. 869-1240 is the number to call. IHOP hotline is open. What are your thoughts on this? Chicken and egg, no big deal. What do we think? We'll get to that. We'll get to more. We'll talk a little baseball, all kinds of good stuff coming up this time of year. It's Sports Daily. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, here to Sports Daily. Odyssey and KEYN bring you Concerts in the Park, sponsored by IHOP. Free live music Friday from 8 to 10 in Andover Central Park at the Capitol Federal Amphitheater. 1607 East Central Avenue in Andover this Friday. It's Annie Up. Bring your lawn chairs, blankets, and extra cash for the food trucks. No coolers allowed. Gates open at 6:30. Working on some stuff. We'll try and get a few more interviews for you lined up. Trying to track down and think we will be able to catch up with Christy Breadbinner maybe midweek on Wednesday. Catch up on the state of things, see how the off season's going, just sort of catch up and look ahead for Wichita State softball. So looking forward to that. Also trying to track down Paul Mills again here for the show. We haven't caught up with them. They've had some summer workouts. I want to just, how does this thing look right now, and how are things going? And the other interesting thing about college basketball right now is, man, it's still active. We saw, who was it? A really good Quinterly, one of the players for Alabama, who Javon Quinterly, who played a little point guard for them. He's all of a sudden in the portal. Yeah. So, we're still not even done with player movement and roster.
I didn't realize you could do that. And I guess, he's a grad transfer, so the rules don't apply. He can enter the portal at a later date. I saw that yesterday. I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Well, we saw it because Kansas State has reported interest, and he is a really interesting fit there, too, because he could play point guard, which, I don't know that they still have just an absolute true point guard, do they? I don't know. So he could be a really nice fit there. Just the offseason never ends, I guess, in college basketball. So we are trying to, and it's, it's a little bit tough for us here because they do a lot of work at the time we're on the show. So we're trying to track that down, but we will. We do expect to have Coach Breadbinner a little later this week, and we'll have our regular guests later this week, but should be a lot of fun. Boy, it is going to be hot this week. Are we ready for this heat? Are we up for this?
Whew. Yeah, it's we always act shocked. It's Kansas in summer, right? That's what we get. Triple digit heat scheduled later this week, Wednesday, Thursday. It's going to be a warm one. So just make sure that if you're out and about, you're taking those precautions. You're
staying hydrated with some iced tea. That's what you need to
do. There you go. I like that.
It's
I'm the
funny.
kind of guy, I don't know about you, I'm the kind of guy I slather on the sunscreen. So,
yeah.
You
It's
can't take
you
too many
shower.
Precautions.
I don't, it's maybe a little too personal. I don't like taking showers. It bugs me that I have to shower every day because I have to go on TV. Ugh. But you got to shower twice a day with sunscreen. I grew up in the country in the summertime. When we were kids, Mom was lucky if she could get 2 showers a week out of us, right? So I guess maybe that's carried over. I know. But you got this sunscreen up. I'm with you. I've got a sunscreen. I'm reflective. Me and the sun don't it's not a good marriage.
Knowing that you don't enjoy showering, it makes me that much more grateful that you and I are not in the same room, that I'm looking at you on a video screen, because I wouldn't want to smell you.
I do it. I have to work in TV every day. So I have to wash my hair and put hairspray, but I don't enjoy it. Who likes getting ready? Come on. Seems like such a waste of time, right? I was looking because it's hot and everyone, we just opened our East HTO and everyone's, how's it going? How's it going? And I'm like, well, we opened in December. So we're still we're watching it in the summertime. I'm trying to look back at last year. I'm like, man, what was going on last year? And I looked and it was already June was so hot last year. So as much as I don't want to look forward to triple digit heat later this week a couple of times, I think we just have to remember back to last year. It hasn't been that bad this year as far as getting scorched. But it will be hot this week. If you want to cool off, how about a couple of teas from HTO? We'll give away a couple of gift cards right now. They'll get you a free iced tea at either the East or West location, West 13th and Tyler, East 127th and 21st. 869-1240. Jad will get you a couple of free tea cards on us here at Sports Daily to HTO. We'll come back. Hour number 2. We'll talk a little baseball, perhaps. Plenty more on the plate coming on a Sports Daily Monday.
This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Welcome back in, everybody. Congratulations to Shannon for winning our HTO giveaway, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily. A couple free iced tea cards for Shannon. Welcome back. It is hour number 2. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor. Chad Chambers producing it. We've been talking a lot of football in the first hour. It wasn't even really where we expected to go, but let's talk a little Major League Baseball, and we will start with the Royals here. So, Tommy, there's an interesting development for the Royals, and it's Michael Garcia. If you listen to the Royals here on KFH, which I typically do when I'm driving around, there is a buzz growing for young Michael Garcia, 23 years old, who is as hot as really any hitter in baseball over the last week or so. He's showing something to us here. He's striking out a little bit too much, But Manny's looking like he can play at this level defensively, and offensively, things look pretty good. And in seasons where we just look for glimmers of hope, Michael Garcia could be giving us one. He's looked pretty good.
Yeah, he has. He's basically been really the only Royals player that I think you look at. I mean, maybe outside of Bobby Witt Jr., but you look at like, okay, like there could be something here with this guy. It's a small sample size. He's gotten hot recently, so I don't want to, jump to conclusions on him, but at least recently from what we've seen, yeah, it looks pretty good.
I mean, he's hitting 280 through 45 games. He has 11 steals. You project, that out, and you're looking at around 40 steals. He's not going to hit for much power, but boy, if he can get on base and run wild a little bit, that you'll take it at this point, won't you? Like he's got defensive versatility. Maybe it's a piece, and he's not a piece they're going to consider trading or anything like that, but maybe it's a piece that could be a part of the future. And I think that's what we have to look for with the Royals right now. Bobby Witt Jr.'s quote unquote struggles are so vastly overstated. Bobby Witt Jr. is just fine. Like he's going to be fine. He's been good. He's on pace this year to, have 25 home runs, about 80 RBIs. He's still striking out a little bit too much, right? He doesn't hit for enough average.
The average isn't great.
The
average is not great. I mean,
it's not.
That's going to be the knock on him right now, right?
It's going to be the knock. So it's the thing that you look at, like when you look at him, because I don't know that anybody thought he was going to be like a 300 hitter, but he's got to be like a 265, 270 hitter, I think, ultimately, to get to his supreme potential. He was a 250 hitter last year as a rookie. He's hitting 245 this year, basically just a tick under on all his slash lines, but he's stealing far more bases. He's striking out at about the same clip. He's walking just a little bit more, which that got better in June and has gotten better. So I'm interested to watch that. RBIs are about the same. Home runs will be about the same. So he's slashing just a little bit less. He's running a little bit more. But I think what we're seeing is it's, after a really slow start, right? He's kind of catching fire a little bit. And I won't be surprised if he doesn't end this year closer to like 260. A better walk to strikeout ratio than he had a year ago. And really, as we talk about his ultimate, ascension, those are sort of the two things that I looked at anyway. Get better on your slash lines, walk more than you walked last year, strike out less than you struck out last year. And I'm probably good with whatever. Now he's running more. That's a nice development. I think that has a lot to do with everybody running more, but he's got it in the tank. I think he's fine this year, by the way. I have very little concern about Bobby Witt Jr. For what it's worth. But Michael Garcia is really interesting now as he has entered in, and we look for things to watch. And, you don't have a lot of hope for some of the names in the past. MJ Melendez struggles, and who's in that lineup that's going to help you long term. Well, that's another guy. I don't know if there's any pitchers there, but at least we got somebody else in the lineup here for the Royals long term.
You hope so. I mean, you cross your fingers that he is. We don't know that yet. And that's what I want to go back, and I want to make sure that we pump the brakes a little bit with Garcia. Yeah. I mean, because it's been good, right? But it's really, really early. And so I just want to be cautious on that. And with Bobby Witt Jr., I think my only concern is him being a victim of the expectations a little bit. I mean, like, I think everybody that has watched him play, watched him come up through the system, join the organization, they have placed the Royals' future on Bobby Witt Jr.'s shoulders. And that's probably fair. Those are probably fair expectations. I just want to make sure that he's not a victim of his own not his own expectations, but the expectations that the Royals fan base and the front office and everybody has for him. Because, I think that it wasn't that long ago. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. We had an entire discussion about whether or not Witt Jr. was having a sophomore slump, and his slash line was okay. Like, it wasn't like he was having a terrible year. And there was conversations about a sophomore slump. So I want to make sure that, if he doesn't bat 300 and have an OPS over 900 and, hits for 40 home runs and drives in 120 runs, that we don't look at him and say, oh, he's a failure. I want to make sure that he's not a victim of those expectations.
He never, I mean, he hit, so he spent, I guess, just a year in the he had the rookie league, right, where he didn't play a whole lot, and then he had his 2021 season in Double-A, and then he got called up to Triple-A, which sort of surprised people. But in that season, he hit 290, right? So it's not like the average is what was making people salivate about his potential. It was the power and speed and defensive ability, in slugging and OPS and stuff. It wasn't necessarily the batting average. He's essentially doing what he did last year with a little more speed.
Right.
It's just, to me, it's the strikeouts. So can you get more selective? Because the second he's more selective, starts to convert some of those strikeouts into walks, everything else is going to come up, rise up. That's what happens in baseball, right? Like, that's what makes the great hitters great, is they don't swing at bad pitches, with some exception, right? But for the most part. And so I have no concern about Bobby Witt Jr. I think Bobby Witt Jr., honestly, Tommy, is a victim of everybody else not being good. I think if the Royals were even at low expectations and not below everybody's expectations, which they are, then we wouldn't be trying to grasp at straws. It wouldn't feel so desperate with Bobby Witt Jr.
At that point, if he is basically doing what he did last year, his slash line is comparable to last year. He's stealing more bases. He's striking out a little bit more. But overall, it's very comparable to what he did a year ago. But yet the conversation is he having a sophomore slump? You're saying that's basically because the entire team is bad? Or is it because the expectations are so great for him and we haven't seen just taking the world by storm with Bobby Witt Jr. that kind of plays into it?
Both. I think we are absolutely desperate for something with the Royals. So that's amplifying just a little bit what we're seeing, right? And I think that it just gets tough because his peers also don't help. So we've had this recent trend in years where guys, and it's not a lot, it's really what, 3, right, with Acuna and Tatis and Soto as they came up, who just at an extraordinarily young age lit the league on fire, and in some cases have continued to do so. Okay. That's not the norm, though. And most baseball players take a couple of years and then they sort of hit their stride. I think that Bobby Witt Jr. is on that path. I don't think we're to the point with Bobby Witt Jr. where it's like, okay, I don't know if he's going to develop into I feel like he's right on the path to develop into exactly what we all thought he's going to be, right? Which is a perennial all-star who can be the face of this organization for a long time. I think that's exactly the trajectory he's on right now. I haven't really seen anything that wavers from that. I don't get because I sense some panic, and I think the panic comes in that everything is, our pets' heads are falling off, right? Everything's going wrong. Bobby Witt Jr. is not even going to be good. What are we going to do? No, I think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be fine. He's getting no help in the lineup. The team stinks. So it's going, you just got to he's okay. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is fine.
Yeah. Why in the world would you give Bobby Witt Jr. anything to hit if you're an opposing pitcher? It's not like there's anybody else in the lineup that's going to be able to do anything to drive him in. So at that point, if you're an opposing pitcher, the game plan is hey, let's just work around him, because
especially too, if he's not selective either, right?
Right.
If he's shown you that he'll swing at bad pitches.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So that's got to be the strategy, for opposing teams. And look at the teams that, like you mentioned Acuna and you mentioned Tatis Jr. Those two guys, opposing pitchers can't work around because the rest of the lineup is dangerous enough for both the Padres and the Braves that you're going to hurt yourself, by going to whoever's next in the lineup on both of those teams. That's not the case with the Royals. It's Bobby Witt Jr. or bust. And so I think that that's probably part of it too. I hope that as his career continues, And as the year rolls on, I mean, we're getting into a point in the year where, like you mentioned at the top of the show, we're getting into trade deadline talk and who the Royals can move and who they can't move. I guarantee you, and I don't know how large of a contingent it is, but I guarantee you there's a contingent of Royals fans, because it's the whole our pets are falling off, the sky is falling, everything is terrible. They might be thinking that Bobby Witt Jr. could be better off on another team and get a haul of prospects back. I don't believe that at this point, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm sure that there probably are some folks out there that think, hey, we're going to be better served by trying to rebuild this franchise completely from the ground up, from the foundation up. And so that's going to be, I'm really interested to see how the Royals do approach the trade deadline.
They're gonna have a fire sale. This is the year. I mean, you don't have there is nothing really outside of Bobby Witt Jr., Pasquantino, and now I think Michael Garcia that holds you back from trading anyone. Is there? Like, at this point, you're not really clinging to anything. And we know that Salvador Perez, as much as it pains us, is probably a part of that too. I don't know what else there is to do. Like, there's not anything there. And what will have to happen is they have to get some of these right, and they're going to have to try to have a really solid free agency to get things back to respectability while they take care of things, because you can't waste Bobby Witt Jr., right? And the other thing about Bobby Witt Jr., by the way, he's so mentally equipped to be fine in his development and deal with this. But like, it's frustrating for some young players to get a grasp on the fact that good, experienced Major League Baseball pitchers, if you swing at bad pitches, are totally fine to walk you and never give you a good pitch until you continuously show them you won't swing at it.
Right.
Like, if I'm a vet Major League Baseball pitcher and I'm playing the Royals, I am totally content never giving Bobby Witt Jr. a pitch to hit.
For sure.
Like,
how confident?
Never.
I get that, and I totally agree with you. How confident are you in the Royals coaching staff to help him develop that eye? Because that, I mean, outside of the talent that Bobby Witt Jr. possesses, isn't that a concern? I mean,
but he doesn't need his coaching staff to. I'm telling him that. Like, he doesn't need, like, that. That's very obvious. Like, his coaching staff, I hope, is working on more than just saying, now don't swing at bad pitches, Bobby.
Right.
Like, I'm telling him that. That's not something he needs a coaching staff for. How much confidence do I have in anybody on this coaching staff? Oh, I don't know, somewhere between 0 and 0. Like, none at all. Like, it's gotten worse. I don't know how anybody has confidence. What was already bad got worse with the same players. So I know everybody, and we've had this discussion too. I know everybody say, oh, you can't do it that fast. You can't. Yes, you can. When it went from bad to worse, because if it was that bad before and now it's worse, I don't know what else to look at. It's the same players that got worse.
Then what in the world is the front office waiting on then? I mean, and I know that it might be a bad look to let your brand new manager go.
Good question.
Even before the All-Star break. But if there's zero confidence in that and they're worse than they were a year ago with the exact same roster, what are they waiting for? If it's going to be a fire sale anyway, what in the world are they waiting for?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Again, here's the part of it, because I think I said this the last time we talked about it. I have not been in this locker room. So when Ned Yost was there and people were, clamoring for Ned Yost and, oh my God, he's too old school, I was in those locker rooms. I was following that team closely, like boots on the ground level. And man, that team was all in for Ned Yost. It was every time you talk to him. So that piece of it, I don't have a grasp on like I used to. That's the part I don't know. If everybody is feeling the desperation for this staff and everybody else, like, God, this is our fault. That's a little bit different. And I do think you have to be careful, because you do have to think of the long-term morale of your team, especially in the short term, if you're making decisions like that. Now, at some point, more like in the offseason, if the results aren't there, you also need to send a message to your team. Like, this is unacceptable and this is not okay. and we're going to make changes until we get this right. So that's where I think the timing gets a little bit interesting. I don't know what grasp of the locker room Quatraro has, have zero insight there. That makes it a little trickier for me. Whereas when it was Ned Yost and it was 2014 and people were clamoring and they didn't do things at the deadline, but I had been there a few times covering them. And I was like, God, I don't know, guys, like that. This team they've got something in this locker room that's like, there's a special component to it. And you don't mess with that. And they didn't, and it turned out all right. And it was, good fortune and all those things that led to then some crazy successes. But that makes it tricky to know in season what you do. If this team is just not performing, but they want to be a part of what it is that then now's probably not the time, because what good is it going to do? Nobody's going to go in there and all that. I mean, they may win a few more games with somebody, I don't know, but I'm fine with them writing it out through this season and then seeing what happens. But at that point, then you make the message very clear, like, this is absolutely unacceptable and not going to work for us.
I think that having some kind of strategy on what things look like after this season. I mean, of course, we all know the season is done. It's a lost year. They're not coming back. It's bad, right? But having a strategy on what happens after this season is really important, not only from a player development and, roster outlook, but also a coaching staff outlook, and so if it's not Matt Quatraro, who is it? Who is the right fit, for this franchise to lead a young team? And that was the, that's what everybody was sold on with Quatraro from the beginning, was that he comes from the Rays organization. They know how to do more with less. They know how to use analytics. They know how to get the best out of young players. That's really what everybody was told about Quatraro coming in and being the new leader of this franchise. If that's not working, then do you change course? And if you do change course, what do you change course to? And that's a John Sherman question. Investing in players, investing in coaches, and the right manager. So I don't know. I don't know what that strategy is. That's above my pay grade. The people who make those decisions make a whole lot more money than me. But if you're going to do a fire sale at the trade deadline, and you're going to do a hard reset outside of a couple of players here and there, you got to have a long-term strategy on exactly what is the vision and what is the direction of this franchise.
I don't think anybody knows what that is. So this weekend, we're talking about the A's because Rob Manfred is being a turd again with the A's fans and trying to blame, the A's fans and the city of Oakland for them moving to Vegas instead of where the blame needs to go, which is to that front office, who is very obviously and clearly not trying to win because they don't want to spend any money. I think it's important when we talk about the Royals. We are not to the point for me where I would say the Royals are not trying to win. In fact, I think it's the Royals trying to win longer when maybe they shouldn't have. That's ultimately led to all of this, right? They tried to hang on to that core. Really, it was for one extra season, which at the time, man, I remember asking that question. Like, we're going to have to make a decision here. Like, do you appreciate this front office for giving the fans one more year of this group that they care so deeply for and trying to run it back one more time, or should they be more cutthroat and trade all these guys? Like, you can't have both. And they did try, and it was a valiant effort, and now they're paying consequences, right? They didn't maximize that in a small market environment. So that they spent some money to do that, by the way. It's very different what we're seeing this year with the Royals and what we're seeing this year from the A's. The Royals are not in this situation because they have tried to win. They've just gotten it wrong. That is different than not trying at all. Not trying at all is far more sinister, is far more, infuriating. As a fan, it sucks because you want your team to be good, but the Royals just haven't gotten the players right in the draft, right? And so we'll see. I don't, the light at the end of the tunnel just isn't there right now. But when at least the group is going to make an effort somehow, okay, it didn't make a lot of sense to spend a ton of money this offseason. I don't have a whole lot of issue with that. I have more issue with what was bad got worse with essentially a lot of the same players. That's a concern for me. But it's not like Oakland. It's not like what's happening in Oakland right now.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges. Any Royals fan that feels like the sky is falling, and you know what, to an extent it is. The play on the field has been terrible. But look at Oakland and then tell me that things are really, really terrible, because you're not at risk of losing your franchise in Kansas City right now. Like, that's not happening. In fact, they're talking about a new stadium in downtown Kansas City. So that's not happening. You don't have a situation where your owner has just given up, like what's happening in Oakland. So as bad as things are, and yeah, like, let's face it, things are bad. It could always be worse. And there's a team out in California that proves that right now, that things could always be worse.
And it's significantly, not even comparably worse.
Yep.
The Royals are going to have to take an off season and all this and spend a little money. That's the hard part. And I think that they were willing to do that. The challenge is going to be now you have to spend it with pitching. I think the hope has always been that you've developed enough pitching that you can go spend a little on the lineup. But
yeah.
when you have to spend it on pitching, I don't know. The Rangers, go look at what they're doing. That's how you spend on pitching. The Royals can't spend like that.
Yeah, and I also wonder, I mean, Kansas City's right now is probably not a super attractive free agent destination, right? So I think they're going to have trouble attracting high-quality free agents, even if they want to spend
because there's no chance you'll be a winner.
Exactly.
Yeah. The money's going to have to talk. And that's on John Sherman if he wants to build a new stadium downtown. That's your challenge now, right? You're going to have to at some point supplement this with some decent free agents, because it's not like there's not enough good young players to turn it around quickly right now. 869-1240. We're talking a little Major League Baseball. Let's look elsewhere. Something I don't think we've done even yet this year. We'll take a look at the standings. Who's for real going to contend and win this thing, potentially, and who's going to be the most active at the trade deadline? We'll talk about it all on Sports Daily as we roll through this Monday.
date. Go! Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. It's Albracht. It's Castor. Tommy, Major League Baseball. We are both fortunate enough that our, other teams that we don't follow professionally, but that we follow as fans are pretty good right now. The Braves, the Rangers. Right now, CBS Sports has the Braves in their power rankings at 1, the Rangers at 3. They're 2 of the 3, really 2 of the 4 best teams by record right now in Major League Baseball. As we look across the landscape, I think it's pretty hard to take anybody over Atlanta right now. Cincinnati's fun. They've got on that long win streak, and now they've lost a couple. I don't know who else, honestly. I think we think the Dodgers will be there, right? Maybe Arizona continues it, but it's the Braves right now, and I think their path is, as the top seed in the top team in the National League, is pretty clear. They seem like there's quite a bit of distance between them and everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big question is going to be how will their rotation hold up? Max Fried is on the injured list. Michael Soroka, they brought him back and really didn't go very well with him in a couple of starts, and now he's back in the minors. They've got, some pitchers that they've had to call up from the minors to try to get them through this stretch with some injuries in their rotation. So I think that's going to be the big question, but their lineup is rock solid. Matt Olson had a great weekend against the Reds, and he is now tied with Shohei Ohtani for the most home runs in Major League Baseball, which I probably wouldn't have predicted at the beginning of the year. I wouldn't have said, hey, it's going to be Shohei Ohtani and Matt Olson leading the majors in home runs. But here we are. Of course, they've got Acuna, they've got Albies, they've got Riley. They've got a pretty potent lineup.
They're they're the gold standard right now for the way to build a team and maintain it. They've done both of those things very well. Okay, so we go to the American League. Man, I feel like it is a jumbled mess in the American League. I think you've got 4 legitimate contenders in just the AL East alone: Tampa, Baltimore, the Yankees, and Toronto. Boston is respectable.
They're all over 500.
But those 4 others in that division to me seem like they could all win a World Series, right? The Central's not very good. I don't know how that shakes out. It's just going to sort of be a battle of attrition. But even then in the West, I don't know how you can't, consider Houston there as always. Texas is very obviously there right now with this, historic for them run differential. And then you've got the Angels, who I think probably should be, in the mix. And I do think Seattle will still, by the end of this, will be in the mix. I still am on the Mariners. I think they've got to get going in the right direction. But there are, at minimum, to me, 8 teams in the American League that could win a World Series this year. And I happen to cheer for one that feels like they're in really good position, but man, this AL race is like, if the National League is 1 and everybody else, I don't even think I would put the Rays as 1. I don't think I'd put anybody as a clear 1. I think you just sort of have 8 teams that are all going to just jockey a little bit for position. And that brings us to that trade deadline, which seems like just highly critical this year.
Yeah, and I really am interested in knowing which teams in the American League specifically are willing to take a big gamble and be buyers at the trade deadline to try to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Historically, I don't feel like the Rays really do that, right? Like, they're typically, if memory serves, not usually big time buyers at the deadline. So I wonder if they stand pat, for the most part. But you look at teams, specifically in the AL East outside of the Rays, like the Orioles or the Yankees. The Yankees are always going to be busy at the trade deadline. That's what they do. And there's kind of some discontent growing amongst the fan base with the Yankees. So, it makes me wonder, who's going to be really, really active at the trade deadline in the American League.
The Rangers will be. because they've sort of been circling the wagons for this moment. They've got to replace DeGrom probably, and their bullpen is not very good. So I think they're going to go get at least a starter and 2 relievers, and that's, you can almost put that in pen. Like, they're going to be active.
Yeah.
I think the Angels, if they're in the mix, reek of desperation and probably also will be. And I think that the Blue Jays would be the other team that sort of is desperate. I think those are the 3, and you nailed it with the Yankees. So maybe there's 4. I think there are 4 desperate type teams to capitalize on this, and it would be the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Rangers, and the Angels. I think everybody else would be fine to stand pat. I mean, everybody will probably do little things. It doesn't make a lot of sense for Tampa or Baltimore at this point to be overly aggressive, but it makes absolute sense for those other teams to be ultimately aggressive and try and push all your chips into the middle of the table now. I think it's going to be, I think we're going to have, and the thing that's been weird about Major League Baseball this year is it's June 26th, Tommy, and I don't know, like, we haven't heard a lot of the chatter of, like, who are those massive names that are going to be dealt. And the fact that there are so many teams in contention in the American League makes that a little bit complicated, quite frankly. There aren't all those teams that might have those star players who would normally get traded are all sort of in the mix. Now you have more teams vying for it. And I bring all of this up because to me, it feels like a seller's market this year. It feels like a seller's market because there are a lot of teams in the mix and a lot of teams that are willing to give up a lot to get a little bit to put them over the edge. Enter the Royals into this conversation. The Royals, in reality, have a hitter in Salvi that can help anybody, right? As a DH or a catcher or a first baseman. He can help anybody if that's the way the Royals choose to go and he's willing to accept that. They also have 2 of the more attractive, I think, bullpen pieces in the fact that, maybe your team doesn't need a closer. If it does, Barlow has been good at that. But maybe you just need some ammo in the bullpen. That's where Barlow and Chapman are absolutely ammo in anybody's bullpen. I think the Royals enter in a pretty good place here in a seller's market with some clear tradable assets where they can help some people.
Yeah, I think so too. And we know that more than likely they are going to be sellers at the deadline.
Yeah.
You talk about the Royals and you talk about that division. Minnesota is in first place and they're a game over 500. So all you have to do if you're a team in that division, so if you're Minnesota or if you're, I guess, Cleveland, they're a couple of games under 500. All you got to do is win the division. And you're going to get in the playoffs and hopefully you can get hot. So I wouldn't be surprised to look at a team like Minnesota potentially as a team that would maybe want to jump in and try to grab a couple of pieces, not to be, the best in the league, but at least just the best in the division and a really bad division to win and move on to the playoffs. That would be another team that I would look at potentially wanting to be buyers.
Maybe Edward Olivares becomes a tradable asset. I don't know what else there is for the Royals, but yeah, I don't know in the Central. But the only thing about the Central to me right now is the Twins would probably be the team that would be willing to get the most active. I think. I don't know that anybody else, because we know Cleveland's not going to do it.
Yeah.
The White Sox probably aren't going to be close enough.
Right.
And Detroit's not quite ready yet. So if is it Minnesota or Cleveland? Minnesota will do it. But will Cleveland? And will Minnesota feel desperate enough to do it if they think they can win the division without it? I don't know.
Because all you got to do is win that division, right? You got to be better than the rest of the bad teams in the AL Central.
I think that, I don't know. I think the activity comes out of the West and the East. Who would be active potentially in the National League? I think Cincinnati is one of the more interesting teams to watch in that regard. Milwaukee's always interesting because they've got top of the line rotation and they always feel like they could win, playoff series.
I think the Dodgers
Miami,
get active. They usually are pretty active at the deadline, and that division is really tough. The Giants are right ahead of them. The Diamondbacks are in first place right now, and the Dodgers, I think they always feel like they need to be in the mix. But right now, they're battling for even a wild card spot. So I can see the Dodgers being buyers too.
Oh, the Giants and the Dodgers and the Padres, I think all three will be buyers. Arizona may feel pressure to then become a buyer, even though that's not what they're, really working for right now.
Are they for real, by the way? Do you think Arizona is a for real team?
Well, define for real. Like, do I think their ascension is real? Yes. Do I think when the season ends, they'll be better than all three of San Francisco, the Dodgers, and the Padres? I do not. But I do think this ascension is real. And that's what I mean. Like, they'll be interesting because do they feel any desperation now to continue? My gut says no. And my gut says they will continue to try and do what they're doing and just hope they're good enough to get there. Sort of like the Royals were in 2013, probably. Right? 2014, like we like this young core. We like all these players. We don't really want to shake this up. And that may anger the fans a little bit, but I'm not sure that the best thing for Arizona to do is to go, dump a lot of assets to try this year. Even though it's there for you, I don't think you want to salvage the long-term potential for success there.
You're knocking on the doorstep. I mean, I disagree with you. I think they got to go all in right now because you're playing in a division with the Dodgers and the Giants and the Padres, who are always stacked and always willing to spend money. Strike while the iron is hot. There's no guarantee if you're the Diamondbacks that this kind of success will continue next year and the year after that and the year after that. So if I'm the Diamondbacks, you're 15 games over 500. You're playing great baseball. You've got a really, really talented young core and a guy that could more than likely win Rookie of the Year in Corbin Carroll. So I say you go for it right now, push all your chips in, see if you can win a championship this year.
Okay. So here's why I don't know that, like, you're going to take a rotation now with Zach Allen has been fantastic, right? Merrill Kelly has also been good, and that's it. So out of your starting rotation, right? Otherwise, it's you're getting by, right? Like you're surviving this thing a little bit. So if that's what your role, I think you have to be realistic. And unless you're going to go get like an elite frontline starter to go with those two guys, I think your chances are tough. So let's say you do that, then what's that going to take? Then now you're potentially compromising this nice young core offensively and everything else that you're putting together this season. And, Ketel Marte's not a young player, but, Walker and I don't know. They've got some guys. I just think it's going to be a tough decision to make because what's going to put them over the edge? It's another frontline starter. And another frontline starter is going to cost them a ton. And I just don't know that that's the right way to go yet if you're Arizona. Because what does 1 year do for you anyway, right? Like, let's say they win it this year, but then they set back their overall rebuild, and then this is it, and they win it this one time out of the next 5 years. Is that worth it for them? I don't know that I believe that it is.
But why roll the dice and, wait for next year, the, year after that? You're 15 games over 500 in a traditionally really difficult and powerful division, and you're leading it right now. And we know that teams like the Dodgers are going to come after you, and they're going to spend all the money in the world to try to get it done. Just keep riding that wave.
You're 2.5 and 3 games up on those two teams, and you've got to think San Diego. I just don't think it's the year. I don't think it. I mean, they look at the Braves. The Braves have held tight and held suit and done what they needed to do, and then they develop these young players. They lock them up. That's how you sustain success in Major League Baseball. Because I think when push comes to shove, if they need to, Arizona is probably not all that different from the Braves from a market perspective and what they can spend if the spending is right. I mean, that's what Atlanta showed us, right? Spend when the spending is right, and they've done that. Cincinnati, you can make the same case for Cincinnati that you're making with Arizona, except Cincinnati's in a much more winnable division than Arizona. And is anybody saying Cincinnati needs to run out and be these massive buyers? I mean, I don't know. Like they've got so many good young players. Like, is that the right path for Cincinnati? I don't know that it is. So, and they probably have a better case to make to do that even than Arizona does.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have an issue at all with Cincinnati wanting to be buyers either. I mean, I think that you've got teams that traditionally are not, and teams like the Reds and the Diamondbacks that we haven't talked about. They've been irrelevant for a long time. I'm watching the Braves and the Reds this weekend. They're playing in Cincinnati, and my wife walks in the room, and she's not a diehard baseball fan, but she follows the Royals and like that sort of thing. And I'm a Braves fan, so she watches that too. And she goes, "Who are the Reds?" I'm like, Cincinnati. She's like, "I've never heard of them." I'm like, "Well, they've been bad. They've been bad for a long time." So I think that you've got teams that we're starting to talk about again, that it's been a long time since they've been in the conversation. Why not roll the dice? If I'm the GM of the Reds or the Diamondbacks, I'm going to go all in right now. Like, I mean, why not? You strike while the iron is hot. You might as well just go for it.
Yeah, and because sometimes that's not the best thing to do.
There's no guarantee you'll ever be back there.
If you're building a certain way, but okay, so I don't know that I think it matters as much if you'll ever be back there as much as it does. You have to increase your chances to get back there. And for some teams, your best path to get back there. Here's the question. It's one of my favorite questions in sports. What's better, one championship or one decade of being in the mix with no guarantee of that championship? And I know the popular thing is to say championship, but I don't
for sure.
But I don't think that's reality, because to me as a fan, we'll use the Royals as an example, even though they're not directly connected. Like, even as much fun as those 2 years were, and they were awesome, right? That was a blast. Having to go through this now for, what are we on, year 5, 6? That's worse. That's worse than the good. In baseball, more than any other sport, by the way. I don't know that this is true for other sports, but in baseball, when you've got a season that lasts as long as it does, when you're counting on baseball to get you through that summer, being bad for 7, 8 years is it's brutal.
Yeah, but if you would have told me that when they won the World Series in 2015, that we were going to have a really long and difficult and terrible stretch of Royals baseball, I think I still would have taken the championship.
Of almost 10 years?
I think so. I think I still would have taken that. I mean, because you can never take that away from them. They won in a market where it's so difficult to do so. They were at the very top of the mountain. I think I would take that. I think I would.
You would take that one championship instead of these 10 years, them being like a wild card contender every year.
Yeah, I think I would.
I don't think I would. And I think baseball's the only sport where I would say that, actually, because like in football for the Cowboys, no, I would have taken a championship instead of this mediocrity. But I'm not so sure mediocrity is a bad thing in baseball.
Ask any Chicago Cubs fan if they would have taken a championship over being in the mix. But they didn't win for 100 and some years. I think that, and they're not good right now, and they've been in a rebuild for a long time that seems never ending. They won the championship in 2016?
But they've
any
been
Cubs
relevant
fan would tell you
since.
that they would have taken that championship.
I know, but they've been relevant since. The Royals have been irrelevant, like total irrelevance. That's the worst. Irrelevant baseball is the worst. 869-1240. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. More Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Albracht and Castor kicking off another week here on Sports Daily. Feeling festive here. Let's give something away. How about some ticket vouchers for the Wichita Wind Surge? These will be good for any home game. We'll get a winner set up. You pick the game, you take the voucher, and you can select where it is that you want to go as far as the schedule goes. And we'll do that for our, I don't know, let's do second caller, 869-1240. We will have Christy Breadbinner on Wednesday. Right at the top of the program, we'll have our regularly scheduled guest. That'll be fun. Again, still trying to track down Paul Mills in a busy time in their year. A lot of time conflicts when we go in the morning and all the workouts and things are happening in the morning. So we'll try and get him in here. What would that be for the second time, Tommy, and check in on everything.
Yeah.
So, but we'll have Christy later this week. So we'll have that for you. We'll come back. We'll wrap up this Monday on Sports Daily right after this. All right, that's it on a Monday, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll have much more this week. At IHOP Hotline will stay open for you. Coming up today, Jim Rome at 11 as they get ready for the Smack Off, their big week on the Rome program. Bob and Jeff at 2, Maggie and Perloff at 4, Zach Gell coming at you at 5 o'clock. Tommy, enjoy the Monday.
Sounds good. We'll see you back here Tuesday. Should be fun.
For Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. We'll see you then.